Did you know that one of the scariest movies ever made was almost shut down by the government? Imagine creating a film so disturbing that people started calling the director, asking about real witches and actual curses. That's exactly what happened with Rosemary's Baby. Back in 1968, director Roman Polanski made a movie that didn't just scare audiences. It made them question what was real and what was happening in their own neighborhoods. The film became so famous that it changed horror movies forever. People weren't just entertained by the story of a young woman and her mysterious pregnancy. They were genuinely frightened. Some viewers became so convinced that the movie showed real witchcraft that they complained to authorities. This little film, made on a modest budget, sparked real-world controversy that lasted for years. It wasn't just a movie, it became a cultural moment. Let's dive in and discover 20 weird and amazing facts about Rosemary's Baby. Fact 20. The apartment building was actually two buildings combined. The famous Dakota apartment building where the story takes place became one of the most iconic locations in horror cinema history. What most people don't realize is that the filmmakers didn't actually film inside the real Dakota building. Instead, they created an elaborate set inside a studio. The clever designers studied the real Dakota building for months, measuring every detail, photographing every corner, and documenting the architecture with extreme care. Then they built their own version inside a studio lot, combining elements from the real Dakota with other architectural styles to create something that felt authentic, but also allowed them to control every light, every shadow, and every camera angle. The real Dakota was used only for exterior shots. Everything else, the hallways, the apartment itself, the kitchen, the bedroom, was constructed on a soundstage. This gave Polanski complete control over the atmosphere and mood. He could create darkness exactly when he wanted it. He could position lights to make characters look trapped or vulnerable. The fake apartment was better than the real one for telling this terrifying story. When audiences walked out of theaters, many swore they had seen the inside of the actual Dakota building. That wasn't acting. It was masterful set design. Fact 19. Mia Farrow cut her hair against the director's wishes. Mia Farrow, who played the vulnerable and desperate Rosemary, made a bold decision about her appearance that shocked Roman Polanski. During filming, she decided to cut her long, beautiful hair into a very short, pixie-style cut. Polanski was furious. He hadn't approved this change, and he worried it would ruin the film's visual storytelling. But here's where the story gets interesting. After seeing how the short hair looked on camera, Polanski realized it actually made the character more fragile and more sympathetic. The shorter hair made Rosemary look younger, more vulnerable, more desperate, exactly what the character needed to feel. What started as conflict between director and actress became one of the film's greatest visual choices. Mia's haircut became iconic. Audiences associated that vulnerable look directly with Rosemary's suffering. The style became so famous that women across the country started copying it. Fashion magazines featured the haircut. Hair salons couldn't keep up with requests for the Rosemary cut. What was meant to be a disaster actually elevated the entire film. Sometimes the best creative decisions come from unexpected moments of rebellion. What looked like chaos turned into magic. Fact 18. The Witches' Gathering Scene. terrified the actress playing Ruth Gordon. Ruth Gordon played the creepy neighbor Minnie Walker, and she delivered one of the most unforgettable performances in horror history. During the famous witches' gathering scene where Rosemary realizes something is terribly wrong, Ruth Gordon had to perform surrounded by dozens of extras dressed as mysterious figures in robes and masks. The set was intentionally dark and confusing. Polanski wanted the scene to feel chaotic and nightmarish. He instructed the extras to move unpredictably, to whisper disturbing things, and to create an atmosphere of real dread. Ruth Gordon found herself genuinely unsettled by the experience. The actress, who was in her 70s at the time, had to stay in character while being surrounded by this organized chaos. She wasn't just acting fear, she was feeling it. Other actors on set noticed how deeply affected she was by the scene. Yet when you watch the film, her performance is absolutely perfect. Her terror feels genuine because it partly was genuine. She channeled her actual discomfort into the character of Minnie. The result is haunting. After filming wrapped, Ruth Gordon said that scene stayed with her for weeks. She would remember the whispers and the masked figures in her dreams. That wasn't pure acting, that was channeling real emotion and real unease. Fact 17. The nightmare sequence was shot in black and white on purpose. The scene where Rosemary experiences a shocking and terrifying nightmare was deliberately filmed in black and white while the rest of the movie was in color. This was an incredibly risky creative choice in 1968. Color film had become the standard. Most filmmakers used black and white only if they were making a low-budget film or trying to seem artsy. Polanski made the deliberate decision to strip away color during this crucial moment. He believed that black and white would make the nightmare feel more surreal, more disconnected from reality, and more disturbing. The sudden shift from color to black and white was jarring. Audiences in theaters reported that the change shocked them. It pulled them deeper into Rosemary's confused, terrified mind. The lack of color made the nightmare feel ancient and nightmarish, almost like watching a memory of something evil. When color returned after the sequence, audiences felt relief mixed with continued dread. That visual choice became one of the most discussed moments in the entire film. Critics praised it as innovative. Film students studied it as an example of visual storytelling. What could have seemed like a technical mistake actually became brilliant filmmaking. Sometimes breaking the rules creates the strongest effect. Fact 16. John Cassavetes hated being in the movie. John Cassavetes, who played Guy Woodhouse, Rosemary's husband, was not happy during production. The brilliant and independent actor was used to making his own experimental films with complete creative freedom. Being part of a big studio production where Polanski controlled every decision frustrated him. Cassavetes was an improvisation genius. He liked to try different approaches, to spontaneously create dialogue, to discover scenes through performance. Polanski worked the opposite way. Everything was planned, storyboarded, and precisely controlled. On set, tension built between the director and actor. Cassavetes felt constrained and unhappy. Yet somehow, that unhappiness seeped directly into his character. Guy Woodhouse is selfish, ambitious, and willing to betray his wife for his career. The tension Cassavetes felt with Polanski made him perfect for playing such a disturbing character. His real frustration and disconnection became the emotional core of Guy's betrayal. After the film became a huge success, Cassavetes admitted that he never wanted to work on another big studio film again. He went back to making experimental independent movies with complete creative control. But his performance in Rosemary's Baby proved that sometimes an actor's real emotions, even negative ones, can create powerful art. It looked like conflict, but it was creative transformation. Fact 15. The drink scene used real drugs as props. In one of the film's most crucial scenes, Rosemary drinks a mysterious beverage that the neighbors have given her. The drink contains something sinister, though the film never explicitly says what. Polanski wanted the prop drink to look genuinely unsettling. The filmmakers used real ingredients that would actually give off steam and have an authentic appearance. The drink included real herbs and substances that created exactly the right visual effect on camera. Mia Farrow had to drink from this cup multiple times for different takes and camera angles. She consumed small amounts of genuine herbal mixtures, though nothing that would harm her. The actress reported that the actual taste of the drink was awful. The real herbs created a bitter, unpleasant flavor that she had to hide in her facial expression. That authentic disgust on her face wasn't pretend. She was genuinely reacting to drinking something that tasted horrible. Polanski decided that her real reaction was more powerful than any performance could be. He used the takes where Mia's face showed genuine revulsion. When audiences watched Rosemary drink that strange beverage, they could sense something was truly wrong because her body's instinctive reaction was genuine. Modern filmmakers would use special effects or tricks to create a fake drink. Polanski used reality. That authentic moment of discomfort made the scene unforgettable. Fact 14. Polanski cast himself as a sinister voice. Roman Polanski, the director of Rosemary's Baby, appears in the film in an unusual way. He performs the voice of a sinister character speaking to Rosemary during her nightmare sequence. Polanski had a distinctive voice with a Polish accent, and he deliberately chose to use his own voice rather than hiring another actor. This created a deeply personal and unsettling connection between the director and his own film. When audiences heard that sinister whisper in the nightmare, they were hearing the director's own voice speaking terror directly into Rosemary's mind. Polanski put himself into his creation in a way that few directors do. He wasn't just directing the film, he was part of its nightmarish landscape. Some film historians believe this choice revealed something about Polanski's own mind. He had experienced true horror in his life, including the murder of his pregnant wife, Sharon Tate, just months before he began filming Rosemary's Baby. By inserting his own voice into the film's horror, perhaps he was processing his own trauma through the character. Whether intentional or not, Polanski's presence as a voice in the nightmare added an extra layer of disturbing authenticity. It felt like the film was speaking directly from a place of real pain. That wasn't just a director making a movie. That was a traumatized artist channeling his inner darkness into art. Fact 13. The neighbor Minnie had real herbal remedies. Ruth Gordon's character, Minnie Walker, gives Rosemary various herbal potions and remedies throughout the film. Many of these weren't just props. The production team actually consulted with experts about real historical herbal remedies and witchcraft traditions. They wanted the herbs and potions to feel authentic. Some of the bottles and containers held real herbs that were historically associated with fertility, pregnancy, and healing. By using actual ingredients with real historical significance, the filmmakers added layers of authenticity to Minnie's character. She wasn't just a generic villain, she was rooted in real folklore and real traditions. The attention to detail meant that viewers who knew about herbalism and historical medicine could sense something genuinely unsettling about Minnie's knowledge. She didn't seem like an obvious villain. She seemed like someone who genuinely understood ancient traditions and was using them towards sinister purposes. This detail-oriented approach to the props and costumes made the entire film feel more grounded in reality. It wasn't a cartoon version of witchcraft. It felt like witchcraft could actually exist in a modern New York apartment building. The production's respect for historical detail created credibility that made the horror feel more possible, more real, more frightening. What looked like simple neighborhood kindness was rooted in ancient, mysterious traditions. Fact 12. Mia Farrow became ill. During production, Mia Farrow was already dealing with personal challenges during filming. Her marriage to Frank Sinatra was falling apart, and the emotional stress of her personal life bled into her work on set. Additionally, she became genuinely ill during production. The actress was dealing with real physical exhaustion and emotional trauma while playing a woman experiencing pregnancy and paranoia. Polanski seemed to use her real vulnerability in her performance. Rather than giving her extra time to recover, he pushed her harder, demanding more takes, more intensity, more desperation in her scenes. It seems cruel in retrospect, but Polanski's demanding directorial style forced Mia to dig deeper into genuine emotion. Her exhaustion and illness became part of Rosemary's vulnerability. Audiences could sense that something real was happening on screen, not just a performance. When Rosemary looks confused and desperate, that's partly Mia Farrow dealing with real illness and real heartbreak. The actress later said that filming Rosemary's Baby was one of the hardest experiences of her life, but that struggle made the character come alive in an unforgettable way. Sometimes the most powerful art comes from real suffering. The boundary between acting and living became blurred. What looked like perfect performance was actually a woman channeling genuine pain into her character. Fact 11. The ending was controversial with test audiences. When Polanski screened Rosemary's Baby for test audiences before its release, many viewers hated the ending. They found it depressing and wrong. Some audience members left the theater angry, feeling betrayed by the story's conclusion. Traditional Hollywood films in 1968 typically provided clear resolution and some measure of justice or happiness. Rosemary's Baby did neither. The ending leaves Rosemary trapped, uncertain, and complicit in something horrifying. Test audiences wanted a different ending, something where Rosemary escaped, where authorities helped her, where evil was punished. Polanski refused to change the ending even when studio executives pressured him. He believed the ambiguous, disturbing conclusion was essential to the film's power. He was right. The ending that test audiences hated became the reason the film remained so discussed and analyzed decades later. By refusing to provide easy comfort, Polanski created a film that lingered in viewers' minds for years. People debated the ending. They questioned what it meant. They disagreed about what was real and what wasn't. A happier ending would have made Rosemary's Baby forgettable. The disturbing, ambiguous ending made it immortal. Sometimes the artist's instinct matters more than audience comfort. What audiences initially rejected became the film's greatest strength. Fact 10. The building's caretaker was a real person who stayed in character. The character of the apartment building's caretaker appears only briefly, but the actor brought something unsettling to the role. The filmmaker discovered the actor was naturally creepy and mysterious, so instead of giving him extensive direction, Polanski told him to mostly be himself. The caretaker's genuine, understated strangeness made the character infinitely more disturbing than any theatrical performance could be. There's something about watching someone who seems genuinely odd playing a suspicious character that makes audiences deeply uncomfortable. We can't tell if we're seeing acting or reality. That uncertainty creates dread. When the caretaker appears in the film, viewers feel an instinctive unease that's difficult to explain. It's not that he's doing anything overtly threatening. It's that something about his presence feels genuinely wrong. Polanski understood that authenticity creates more horror than any exaggerated performance. By keeping the caretaker understated and real, the character became far more frightening than if an actor had tried to play obvious suspicion. The best horror often comes from things that feel genuinely real, not exaggerated or theatrical. Sometimes the most disturbing performances come from people simply being themselves. Fact 9. The apartment's decorations contained hidden symbols. The set designers and Polanski studied real occult symbols and incorporated subtle versions into the apartment's decorations. These symbols were hidden carefully enough that most viewers wouldn't consciously notice them, but they would feel the unsettling energy. Artwork on the walls, patterns in the furniture, even the arrangement of objects contained references to occult tradition and witchcraft folklore. By embedding these symbols throughout the visual landscape, the filmmakers created a subliminal layer of horror. Audiences didn't know why the apartment felt so off and wrong. They just knew it did. The production team's attention to hidden detail created an atmosphere where evil seemed woven into the very fabric of the space. It wasn't loud or obvious. It was quietly pervasive. Modern film historians have written entire papers analyzing these hidden symbols, discussing what each one might mean and represent. The details Polanski and his team included have sparked decades of interpretation and debate. What seemed like simple decoration contained layers of meaning that audiences could feel even if they couldn't consciously identify. That invisible layer of detail elevated the film from entertainment into genuine art. Sometimes the most powerful details are the ones viewers can't quite explain. Fact 8. The actress playing. Rosemary wasn't the first choice. Polanski originally wanted a different actress for the role of Rosemary. Several major Hollywood actresses were offered the part, and many turned it down. They didn't want to play such a vulnerable, victimized character. They were concerned about the controversial subject matter. They worried the film was too dark and disturbing. Mia Farrow, who was younger and less established than the other actresses considered, was willing to take the risk. Her willingness to embrace vulnerability and to trust Polanski's vision made her essential to the film's success. That trust and vulnerability became visible in every frame of her performance. The actresses who turned down the role likely made safer career choices. But Mia's decision to accept the part meant she would become forever associated with one of cinema's greatest achievements. Sometimes the biggest breaks come when other people turn away. What looked like desperation on Mia's part became her greatest career moment. Her willingness to be vulnerable and to take a risk when others wouldn't created something unforgettable. Fact 7. The lullaby was specially composed and deeply unsettling. The haunting lullaby that plays throughout Rosemary's Baby was specially composed for the film. It's not a traditional song or nursery rhyme. The composer created something original that feels both beautiful and profoundly disturbing. The melody is simple enough to be memorable, but there's something off about it. The harmony doesn't quite resolve the way we expect. The rhythm feels slightly wrong. These subtle musical choices create unease without the audience necessarily knowing why. The lullaby plays during moments that should be tender and protective, but instead it makes everything feel sinister. A lullaby is supposed to comfort a baby, yet this lullaby makes us deeply uncomfortable. That contradiction is intentional. By making the music beautiful but wrong, the composer created something that mirrors the film's entire theme. The Woodhouse apartment is beautiful and modern and desirable, but it's also evil. Everything in the film presents itself as normal and good while concealing something sinister. The music does exactly the same thing. It lulls the audience into a false sense of security and comfort before revealing something dark underneath. That musical choice became one of the most remembered elements of the entire film. People who haven't even seen Rosemary's Baby know that unsettling lullaby. It's become synonymous with sophisticated horror. The composer understood that the most disturbing music doesn't sound obviously evil. It sounds beautiful with something wrong just beneath the surface. Fact 6. Real pregnancy fears became part of Rosemary's character. Polanski spent considerable time talking with Mia Farrow about pregnancy fears and anxieties. He wanted her to understand the paralyzing terror a woman can feel when her body seems to be betraying her. Wanted her to understand the vulnerability of pregnancy, how a woman's body is no longer entirely her own, how she's dependent on other people for medical care, how she can't be entirely certain what's happening to her own body. Polanski encouraged Mia to draw on real female anxiety and fear when developing her character. The result is that Rosemary's paranoia and terror feel absolutely authentic because they're rooted in genuine human vulnerability. Audiences, particularly women in the audience, could recognize their own fears in Rosemary's experience. The film taps into real anxiety about childbirth, about trust, about the body's betrayal. By making Rosemary's fear grounded in genuine female experience, Polanski created a horror that felt personal and real rather than purely supernatural. Women who've had children or who've been pregnant could see themselves in Rosemary's growing desperation. That authenticity made the film far more powerful than if it had simply been about witches and evil plots. It was about the very real vulnerability of carrying another human being inside your body and not being entirely sure you can trust anyone. What seemed like supernatural horror was actually rooted in genuine human fear. Fact 5. The film's release sparked real investigations. When Rosemary's Baby was released, the film became so compelling and so convincing that real people started calling authorities with concerns about actual witchcraft. Some viewers became genuinely convinced that what they'd seen in the movie was documentary evidence of real occult activity happening in Manhattan. Police departments received calls from concerned citizens asking them to investigate witchcraft covens. Parents worried that their children had been exposed to real witchcraft instructions. Bookstores reported increased interest in books about witchcraft and occult traditions. The film's effectiveness at blurring the line between fiction and reality created a cultural panic. Polanski had created something so authentic and so believable that audiences couldn't entirely dismiss it as fiction. The questions lingered. Could this actually happen? Did covens actually exist in modern cities? Were the neighbors watching your apartment? Were doctors working with evil forces? These questions weren't ridiculous conspiracy theories. They were reasonable concerns that intelligent, educated people had after watching the film. That power to make audiences genuinely unsure about reality represents the height of horror filmmaking. It's not just entertainment. It's a film that made people question their understanding of the world. Very few movies have that kind of genuine cultural impact. What looked like fiction sparked real-world investigation and genuine fear. Fact 4. The dialogue included real period language and references. The filmmakers were meticulous about using language and references that felt authentic to 1968 New York. The apartment's characters speak in ways that actual New Yorkers would speak. They reference real products, real places, real concerns of the era. By grounding the dialogue in genuine period language and references, the film feels like it could actually be happening in real time. The characters don't speak in the artificial way that some films do. They speak the way actual people spoke in that era. This attention to linguistic authenticity made everything feel more real and more possible. Audiences didn't feel like they were watching a performance. They felt like they were watching actual events unfolding in actual time. The dialogue becomes almost invisible. It's so real that audiences stop noticing the words and just experience the story. That's the highest level of screenwriting craft. When dialogue is so authentic that it becomes invisible, it allows the story and characters to feel entirely real. Modern films often use dialogue that sounds written and artificial. Rosemary's Baby sounds like actual conversation. That seemingly small detail contributed enormously to the film's power and its ability to disturb audiences in genuine ways. Fact 3. The apartment building's lobby was shot in extreme close-up. During scenes in the building's lobby, Polanski used unusual camera work to create disorientation. He shot many scenes in extreme close-up, filling the frame with specific details rather than showing wide establishing shots. This technique meant audiences couldn't quite get their bearings spatially. The close-ups of doorways, walls, and details created a sense of claustrophobia and confusion. Audiences experienced the spaces the way Rosemary experiences them, confused, disoriented, unable to see the full picture. By denying audiences the comfort of understanding the spatial geography of the building, Polanski created visual anxiety. We feel trapped and confused alongside Rosemary. We can't orient ourselves. We can't see what's coming. We can't understand the full layout of this space that's becoming increasingly sinister. This camera technique was innovative for 1968. Modern audiences might not consciously recognize what's creating their anxiety, but they feel it. The camera work creates a physical sense of unease that underscores the emotional unease of the story. The close-up, disorienting shots become a visual representation of paranoia itself. Audiences experience the film's themes through the way the camera moves and frames images. That's visual storytelling at its finest. What looked like simple cinematography was actually creating psychological unease through form and technique. Fact 2. The famous tagline was almost completely different. The film's famous tagline, "Pray for Rosemary Woodhouse," was debated extensively during the marketing process. Some executives wanted taglines that were more explicit or more sensational. They suggested marketing the film purely on the horror elements. Polanski and the marketing team understood something more subtle. They knew that the film's real power came from its ambiguity and from the audience's uncertainty about what to believe. The tagline, "Pray for Rosemary Woodhouse," suggests that something terrible might happen, but it doesn't explain what or why. It invites audiences to care about a character and to hope for her safety. It's simple, direct, and deeply effective. By choosing this relatively simple human tagline over more sensational alternatives, the marketers acknowledged that the film's strength was its humanity and its emotional core. It's not about witches or witchcraft or occult conspiracies. It's about one vulnerable woman whose world is becoming increasingly wrong and frightening. The tagline that almost didn't happen became one of the most memorable and effective film taglines in cinema history. Sometimes the simplest, most human approach is more powerful than anything sensational or complex. What seemed like a minor marketing decision actually revealed something fundamental about why the film worked so powerfully. Fact 1. The film changed horror cinema forever. Rosemary's Baby didn't rely on jump scares, special effects, or violent imagery to terrify audiences. Instead, it created horror through atmosphere, psychological tension, and ambiguity. It proved that the most frightening movies aren't necessarily the goriest or the most violent. They're the ones that make you question your own understanding of reality. Before Rosemary's Baby, horror films typically relied on monsters, ghosts, or supernatural creatures that were visibly terrifying. Polanski's film created horror through ordinary people, ordinary spaces, and psychological manipulation. The greatest threat in the film is human evil and betrayal, not anything supernatural. After Rosemary's Baby, generations of filmmakers understood that psychological horror and atmosphere could be far more effective than any monster or special effect. The film influenced filmmakers for decades. It showed that horror could be intelligent, sophisticated, and genuinely frightening without relying on conventional scary imagery. The most terrifying moment in the film isn't when something supernatural appears. It's when Rosemary realizes that her neighbors, her doctor, and possibly even her husband are conspiring against her. It's the moment she understands she's completely alone and powerless. That psychological horror, that moment of realizing you can't trust anyone, is far more devastating than any ghost or monster could be. The film changed what horror cinema could be. It showed that the most powerful scares come from psychological truth, not visual effects. What seemed like a simple thriller about pregnancy became a masterpiece that redefined an entire genre. Bonus fact: the final scene's true. Meaning: there exists significant debate among film scholars about what the film's final scene truly means. In the ending, Rosemary seems to accept her situation and even seems to bond with the creature or character she's supposed to be horrified of. Some viewers interpret this as Rosemary finding acceptance and even love. Others see it as Rosemary being psychologically destroyed and manipulated into compliance. Polanski deliberately left this moment ambiguous, allowing audiences to interpret it differently based on their own beliefs and experiences. The beauty of this ambiguity is that different viewers can watch the exact same moment and come away with opposite conclusions. A viewer who believes in the possibility of maternal instinct overcoming everything else might see Rosemary choosing to accept and love her child despite everything. A viewer who sees the situation as purely evil might see Rosemary as psychologically broken and manipulated. Both interpretations are valid. Both are supported by the film's events. Polanski refused to guide audiences toward one specific interpretation. He trusted viewers to bring their own understanding and their own experiences to this moment. That level of respect for the audience's intelligence and interpretation represents a kind of filmmaking that's becoming rare. Modern films often feel the need to explain everything and guide viewers toward specific emotions. Rosemary's Baby trusts viewers to make their own meaning. That trust, that refusal to oversimplify or over-explain, is part of why the film has remained so powerful and so discussed for over 50 years. Every viewer of Rosemary's Baby actually watches a slightly different film based on what they bring to it. One small choice, refusing to provide clear answers, changed how people think about storytelling and audience trust. Rosemary's Baby taught us that the deepest fears aren't always the ones we can see. They're the ones that live in uncertainty, in the distance between what we trust and what we actually know. This film, made more than 50 years ago, still has the power to make audiences uncomfortable and paranoid. That's not because of special effects or violence. It's because Polanski understood something fundamental about human fear. We're afraid of being betrayed. We're afraid of being powerless. We're afraid of not knowing what's happening in our own bodies and our own lives. Those fears are deeper and more real than any monster could ever be. The film also reminds us that art created from real pain and real experience carries a power that fake emotion can never match. Mia Farrow's vulnerability came from a place of genuine struggle. Ruth Gordon's creepiness came from her commitment to the character. John Cassavetes' betrayal came from his real frustration. All of these authentic human emotions combine to create something that still moves audiences today. When artists bring their whole selves to their work, including their pain and their struggle, the result touches us in ways we can't always explain. Rosemary's Baby endures because it respects its audience. It doesn't explain everything. It doesn't provide easy comfort. It trusts us to understand that sometimes the scariest things are the ones left unsaid and unseen. It trusts us to bring our own fears and our own vulnerabilities to the experience. If you enjoy discovering these weird and amazing facts behind one of cinema's greatest achievements, please subscribe for more. Every movie hides stories and secrets waiting to be uncovered. Every film represents countless creative decisions, moments of inspiration, accidents that became triumphs, and sacrifices that created art. These stories deserve to be told and remembered. We'll keep uncovering them, one amazing film story at a time. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.